Welcome to Across Borders, a program that journeys beyond geographical boundaries to explore the complexities of our interconnected world, transcending borders and bridging cultures to uncover the stories, experiences, and challenges that define our global community. My name is Grace Komalafe, and I thank you for being part of this program. Today, we shall be looking at international labor market. It is a fact that people move from one part of the world to another on a daily, and this decision is influenced by various specific factors or peculiarities, but with a positive expected end. Unfortunately, while some expectations come alive, some do not near the light of the day, leaving the dreamer in a different world entirely. Join me as we explore the topic, international labor migration. To have this conversation, I have an expert in the house who will be shedding light on the topic for today. But before I start, it is important for me to note this aspect that economic opportunities, conflict, environmental factors, and family reunification could be considered as primary drivers for international migration. But really, we are narrowing it down, to international labor migration. So we are not putting everything together. But of course, like I said earlier, we have a guest in the house. He is a human rights activist and a veteran of the refugee and the migrant movement in Germany. He initiated the campaign for the right to freedom of movement for refugees in Germany, otherwise known as the Anti-Residence Campaign in 2000. Dr. Sonny Onwenyeke, you're welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you.
Thank you very much.
So I hope I didn't bother you.
No, it's okay.
Okay, so like I said earlier, we want to talk about international labor migration because yes, people travel for various reasons, probably to study, for visit, and all of that.
Right.
But let's deal with international labor migration. And to start with, I want to ask you, I mentioned some elements around it, but because you are a specialist, so I want you to share with people, our audience, what are the primary drivers of international labor migration, and how do they vary across regions and countries?
Thank you for having me here, and I'm happy to be part of your program here. First, I want to say that I'm happy to participate in this discussion, but I wouldn't necessarily regard myself as an expert because the problem is that many people claim to be experts in fields which they actually know very little about. But the way the whole system is set up is that you give this kind of names to people, whereas it is actually lacking in substance. So I want to make it clear that I am not a certified expert, so to speak, on this issue, but I've got some experience dealing with this issue for a very long time and experiencing it in Germany firsthand, and I can say one or two things about that.
Okay, thank you. So before you start with the topic, I just asked a question. But I actually went through your profile and I realized you studied international relations and global governance in Bremen.
Right.
And you completed your doctorate in UK on transnational advocacy network.
Right.
I'm correct.
Yes.
So all of this put together, I know there's a couple of experiences. So of course, you are a good hand to handle this.
Thank you.
Conversation.
Thank you.
So can we have this?
Yeah, the thing is that if you look at the trend of international migration, particularly narrowing it down to the labor market, is nothing new. There have been people moving from all across the globe at different times in our history for the purpose of labor. And the essence of it is to improve your lives. Beyond seeking safety, human dignity, and respect, the ultimate goal is to improve your life as a human being. So people migrate from one country to the other for the purpose of improving their life situation, but then you see that there are different reactions to it, at different times in the different countries where people migrate to, and then there are the narrative that surrounds it as to why are they here, what are they doing here, why is it that they have to come to this country, and so forth and so on. What we have to keep in mind is that we are in a situation globally where the anti-migration sentiment is very high, driven by right-wing populism in Europe, and as we saw recently in the US, this is no surprise. But the primary thing to note about this is that migration is a natural phenomenon. It's not something that happens just in a single minute with one or two people and it disappears. It has been on for years and years and years, and my guess is that it will continue to be like this for a long time to come. At the moment, you have a situation where people migrate to work in certain countries. I don't want to generalize that much, but you see people migrate from West African countries, for example, across the Sahara Desert, across the Mediterranean Sea, to move and migrate into Europe to seek a better life. Well, why are these people moving from this region in particular? Because their means of livelihood have been destroyed. There's this slogan in the refugee and migrant movement in Germany saying, we are here because you destroyed our countries. You destroyed our countries both by your trade policies, by the wars that you perpetuate in our countries, by the political corrupt elites that you support, and the weapons that you import, that you send to our countries. So these are the various things that drives people to migrate from a region like West Africa, for example, to go to Europe to seek a better life. And if their livelihoods have been destroyed by the political and economic interests of the West, so to speak, in their countries, they have that natural right to migrate to somewhere where they feel they can get an element of respect and dignity and, of course, survival.
Okay, thank you very much. So before I move on to the other question I actually penciled down,
right.
I think from what you said, you talk about the slogan where people say, okay, because you destroy our country, so we have come to stay. So I want to ask, don't you think it would have been better if they decide to stay back in their home country to put it in order, rather than saying, oh, because you destroy our country, now we are coming to your country to stay? Because for me, you going to this country to stay, the things you do, like you work for them, whatever you do goes into the economy of that country. So instead of you staying back home to put your place in order, you now say, oh, these people destroyed our country, I'm going to. So, I mean, for me, it's just a question.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I can understand this question, and many have raised it before, but the point, what many people miss with this is this. You can go very practical and look at situations in countries where people have decided to stay. I take the example of the SARS protest in Nigeria, for example, a few years ago. People decided to stay, people decided to protest, and what happened at Lekki Beach? Or Lekki toll gate?
Right.
Yeah, what happened? It was a matter of shooting and killing and stuff like that. And when you experience such things, you realize the prospect of you staying here and putting your country in order is not very high, right? Some, of course, stayed. Not many people, not the majority of people migrated as a result, but many did make that move, and there are very many other situations like that who move, right, to first to seek survival, right, and not just a matter of putting your country in order. The reason why your country is not in order has to do with the international global economic system and financial institutions. You know, so it's a kind of interconnected in a way, and you cannot, you have to deconstruct it to realize what is really underneath it. And that's why this slogan, we are here because you destroy our countries. Because when you look at that, you see the different ways in which the livelihoods of people have really been destroyed, and yet at the same time, these people have to seek survival somewhere, and therefore they migrated to go somewhere else.
Okay, let's look at the impact of international labor migration in the economies of both the ascending and receiving countries. And of course, what are the key economic benefits and challenges associated with this?
On the one hand, you can say when people migrate to, let's say, a place like Europe, generally, I can tell you the Europeans may officially not like it as a official policy, but in a way, they do benefit a lot from it because it's a massive source of cheap labor, right? Okay. Even if they do this work like others will do who are citizens of those countries, the money they will get for it is much lower than what their citizens will get. As a result, is a rich source of cheap labor for these economies, and of course, it is exploitation of the people who experience that kind of situation in the countries that they migrate to. That is on the one hand. I mean, we are not exhausting that at that point, because if you look at the details of it, what these migrants suffer, what they go through, the discrimination and the racism that comes with natural European policies, so to speak, you just realize, okay, there is a different side to this idea that here is a better place for me to be than in my home country. So, but you look at the effect of those who manage to migrate, who manage to secure the papers, the legal papers to work, and who think of their families and friends back home. When they do this, they are able to work, save a little money, so to speak, or from their monthly salaries, they are able to repatriate some of these funds to help people back home. There are very many people, as we see right now in this country, things are difficult. Things are very hard for very many people. So when you have a family where one or two people migrated from, they've been able to secure the means of sustenance in Europe or in America, where they can get some sort of regular payment, regular income. They are able to help those back home, because we as Africans, we are not living in this individualistic, isolated, ideological kind of life where you are there for you and yourself alone. We are naturally tended to care for our communities, our families, and so forth and so on. And therefore, whatever they get there, do help those back home where they left from.
All right, thank you. You actually mentioned rights, protection, exploitation, and that will bring me to this question.
Right.
So what are the rights or protection for migrant workers in other countries? You know, and of course, how can we address the issue of exploitation and abuse of migrant labor?
Well, if we dive into history, we have to realize that we are in a totally full-blown capitalist system, right? And in capitalism does not survive without exploitation, right? So what you have is those of us who migrated out and are working in those different, we are all being exploited. Exploited because we are not being paid the full value of our contributions to whatever economy we are supposedly supporting or working in those countries. Now, you talk about the rights. In Europe, you cannot also, when you look at this from a critical perspective, you cannot detach European migration policies from white supremacist policies, because the idea that whites are superior to other races is fundamental to all European societies. This is the basis of racism that is there, and so it doesn't matter how qualified you may be, it doesn't matter how suitable you may be to a particular job. You have to be prepared that you are going to be discriminated against. You have to be prepared that you are going to be treated in a way different from those your colleagues or others who are white people in this society. This is basically the structure of European societies. So the rights that may be guaranteed to migrants or refugees, so to speak, in these countries, they are always limited. They are always limited, and that is why you see this continuous fight for equality every time in these various countries.
Wow, thank you very much. I mean, if we want to go into racism and all of this. It's a different topic entirely.
Absolutely.
Honestly.
Absolutely.
So, but I'd like us to look at the role of remittance. What role does remittance play in the global economy?
Right.
You know, of course, we want to know how they affect the well-being of migrant workers, families, even in their home.
Right. The thing is, if you look at much of the news that is covered in the development world, so to speak, a lot is made of how much the Western countries, the so-called developed countries, how much aid, development aid they send to so-called poorer countries and so forth and so on. But if you actually go into the details and look at how much remittances come from migrants outside of their country, back home to help their families and all that, it is much more than the development aids that come into each of these countries recently. So what you see is not really like we need these aids that are coming from these foreign countries. We actually need our people who do the work and they earn what they deserve from it. If they can earn more for what they actually do, which is what they deserve, we will get a lot more benefits for our people, right, than what may be coming from aid. This is to say, it doesn't matter how much aid these governments, foreign governments are giving us. What our people are contributing to our economy, to our families back home, is much more than these foreign aids that we are getting at any time. That is the reality. You can check the records, and therefore you have to consider that those of us who migrated out of this country, and very many other African countries for that matter, is not also peculiar to African countries. From the Philippines to Bangladesh and Pakistan and so forth and so on, the same pattern operates. So it's a huge resource that some of us are able to make these contributions to our different economies back home and help those who need it, while not necessarily relying on the aid from the so-called developed countries.
All right, thank you very much. Let's speak to the well-being of migrant workers. You spoke about the structure of Africa, or let me bring it down on Nigerians. You know, when they go out there, they work, they don't forget home.
Right.
They just have this orientation, this mentality that, no, I have a family back home and I need to send them money and all of that. So, in some cases, in fact, we've had situations where you see people sending money from abroad back home to take care of projects for them.
Right.
Despite taking care of the family members. This is 10 I have for you, this for you, and this 100 is for me. You did the job. Right. So, and at some point, we've heard stories where these people felt, I mean, it's making a whole lot of money out there. So, I mean, I can just make do with this.
Exactly.
How do we begin to reorientate families, you know, or individuals that believe people that are out there are just making it. They don't consider the well-being. They don't consider how they work to make all of this money. I mean, I wanted to speak to this.
This is very interesting because I have experienced many situations where these kind of stories come up, and also at some point had to intervene on one level or the other. The fact is that we basically need a form of re-education about what we think we have learned about Europe or the developed world, so to speak, because I think that very many of us, we are prone to this idea that the moment you travel out of this country, you go to Europe, you go to white man's land, there's a lot of money there, and you bring all the money back home, your family can enjoy here. People back home here have to go into a form of re-education, not just the people back home, also very many of us, or basically all of us, also outside. We have to re-educate ourselves about the realities of what the situation really is. Many of us tend to look at white people as people who are so rich, people who have so much money that our children just go from here to there and get some of this money and bring it back, and that's it. No, it's not as simple as that. A lot of the people that travel out of this country, they also have to work from morning till night like very many others to make a living. They've got to pay their bills, they've got to pay their rent, they've got to take care of very many other things like every other person before they will have the extra bit that they can send home to support the family. So whatever comes home should be judiciously used, you know, and cognizance has to be taken of the fact that somebody has been able to send you money to say, I help you with this and I take care of this problem for you, doesn't mean that this person is plucking that money from any tree in any way, you know. Many have to endure a lot of inhumanities just to make sure that they are able to meet their obligations to their family back home in Nigeria. So it's something that people back home also really have to reckon with, right? That it's not easy for very many people who are there. I deal with exactly.
They say they can afford.
Right. I deal with very many refugees and migrants who are stranded on the streets in Europe. You know, we have to find a way to provide for them, to see where they can sleep, to see what they can eat, because, like I said, the European governments, they are very anti-migration at the moment for whatever reason, and so they push them out.
Yes.
They push them out of the system entirely without any social benefits, no place to sleep, and nothing to eat. We have to provide for many of these kinds of people on the street. So it's not, and these kinds of people, there are people back home will be expecting that they are sending money.
In fact, I wanted to speak to that, you know, I mean, more like adding to what you just said, you know, you hear of some individuals that they've been gone for a couple of years and they refuse to come back home.
Right.
They refuse to come back home, not because they are not because they don't want to come back home, or probably they are not doing well.
Sure.
They don't want to come back with to say, oh, I've gone for 100 years, I've gone for 30 years, I've gone for, and I came with nothing. That shame and you know, because of that they just stay back and they endure all of stuff on the street. Okay, so but quickly before we go on a short break, I want us to speak to this. Yes, I've heard of the system of government abroad, the way they help their citizens and even the migrants to keep up with the things they have to do, like getting an apartment, owning a car, and all of that, mortgage, and all of this. Because of course you work and you pay taxes. Before you know it, what you are left with. I mean, I've not been there. That's the information I'm being fed with. So I now begin to consider this aspect of mortgaging. If this is a thing the government is doing, don't you think it's a good idea to replicate back home?
Right. Sure. There is a possibility that yes, you could work, you could obtain a loan, you could take a mortgage on a car or on an apartment or whatever. But all this would have to be assessed based on your income and your state of health, the longevity of the contract that you have, and so forth and so on, to ensure that you are able to meet these obligations. Because if you take a mortgage on a house and at the end you are not able to meet this obligation, maybe you are fired in your workplace, you don't have the income anymore to keep it up, you'll be forced to sell this house, probably at a lesser value than you bought it, and then you are indebted for it. The money they take, the banks get back. It's possible to replicate those kind of things back, but at the same time you have to realize that there are a lot of hurdles to go through before you get to that point. For very many people who are here, mortgage to get a car or to get a house is not the first priority. If you go on the streets of Lagos, if you go on the streets of Benin and so very many other cities, you have young men and women who are on the street hawking stuff on their head every single day.
That's why I'm actually very particular about government.
Right.
You know, because if it's coming from the government perspective, it could be very affordable.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a mansion. It doesn't have to be something.
Right.
Of course, what are the structures they can put in place to say, okay, this is what we want to do. Let's put A and B together so that Nigerians can also.
Of course. No doubt there are possibilities to do this. We just have to find a way to come to the situation to realize that, yes, these are what the people need, and this is what we can do to further that. Otherwise, if you do not take it serious, that is a serious problem that needs to be addressed, then you cannot conceivably develop a solution to deal with it. I think the seriousness has to come not only from the government, but from the people themselves. The people should advocate for it, they should agitate for it, and then let's see where it takes us.
Okay, thank you very much. If you're just joining us, this is Across Borders, and we've been speaking with Dr. Sonny Onweyeke. Okay, so he has actually been talking around international labor migration, but we want to go on a short break at the moment. When we come back, we'll continue where we are dropping the question at the moment. Just stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Just in case you're just joining us, this is Across Borders, and we've been having a conversation with Dr. Sunday Onweyeke, and we've been speaking on international labor migration. So before we went on break, I think we spoke about how we could replicate what they do over abroad here in Nigeria. We're talking about mortgaging either a car or house and all of that. But we want to move to the next question quite very quick. I want to ask you, how can host countries and communities effectively integrate migrant workers? Let me take this again. I'll take this again. So how can host countries and communities effectively integrate migrant workers socially and culturally? And what are some successful models for promoting social cohesion and inclusion? Is that very clear?
Right. Okay. This is an interesting question because there is the experiences that some of us have made that is generating a little bit of attention when it comes to the issue of integration. On the general level, you will see a country like Germany says, if you are a refugee here, if you're a migrant here, you need to integrate. And they provide, to some extent, language courses for some people to learn the language, because language is always the means to integration. All right. You would expect then that when they learn the language, they are gradually integrated into the society and all that. They are settling down and all that. But it doesn't take away the fact that Germany as a country remains very hostile to migrants and refugees in particular, and African refugees more specifically, so to speak. So if you look at it, on the one hand you think, yeah, they preach this integration of a thing, but in practice, they are actually preaching isolation, right? So that becomes very difficult to reconcile. If you think, yes, this is a society that welcomes migrants and they want them to settle down here, they want them to integrate into this society. That is on the one hand. Even among those that have integrated properly, right? You realize integration is not enough. They want you to assimilate. What does that mean? They want you to forget everything about where you come from and your cultures entirely, and pick up theirs as the sole representative of what you abide by and stuff like that, which is very difficult for very many of us, because we as Africans, or basically anybody from other cultures, you don't just isolate somebody from the culture this person comes from, right? Part of you is always where you come from, who you are. That is what makes you this person that you are. In a way, many of these European countries want you to leave everything there behind and only follow whatever it is that is prescribed for you there. So it becomes very difficult to reconcile this idea of integration and all they preach on that level. So there is some tension in that regard. The other thing about this is that some of us are not very keen to integrate into this society, because what do we see? We see a high level of racist practices, racism, discrimination, and all this. These are part and parcel of these European societies. And some of us feel, no, I don't even want to learn your language because I don't want to integrate into this racist society. That is why some of us refused to learn the language, for example, and we didn't want to be integrated into the German society. So while there may be things that, yeah, it's encouraging to get you to speak the language because you can then have a better chance of working or whatever. But at the end, you have to realize that you come from a different society, a different culture, with different values actually, right? Which they just want you to deposit somewhere and go with whatever they prescribe to you. So it's difficult to recommend, yes, this is a good practice that we could import from there or whatever. It's very difficult to make such recommendation.
All right, so you talked about language, learning the language.
Right.
Maybe some of their cultures. So that would take me to talking about access and education and healthcare.
Right.
I mean the migrant workers.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the challenges? Because
Right.
when you say, oh, they want you to learn these things, they want you to, do they have them at their disposal? Do you just have these things that are readily available for you to get in? So what are those challenges that migrant workers face when it comes to accessing the healthcare and education?
Right. The point to note with this is the access to the services that are available basically depends on your legal status. If you've got a resident permit, for example, you will be entitled to go to whatever school, whatever university, whatever vocational studies you may want to pursue. You have the right to work, of course, and the type of work you may want to do will depend on your interest and your qualifications and stuff like that. That is generally so. But the thing you find is that very many times people are pushed out of the system. You may be in Germany or some other European countries for 10, 15 years, and you are still not having a stable legal status. With that, you are not readily able to do what you would like to do. You are left in a limbo, for example, and if you don't have a stable legal status, which enables you to access full health care and educational opportunities and stuff like this. So that is the way it is. But if you have the legal status, of course, this is readily available. Everybody in Germany will be insured, so to speak, if you are not pushed out of the system already at some point in time.
Okay. So you're talking about the legal status. So it also has to do with policies.
Right.
So I want to ask, what are the immigration policies and regulations in different countries regarding legal immigration? And of course, how can government create more effective and humane immigration policies? Because I think that's very important.
Yeah, it is. It is important, and we've been trying to say this for a very long time. If you look at what has been happening for decades now, so to speak, with African migrants crossing from sub-Sahara Africa, crossing the Sahara Desert, crossing the North African boundaries, crossing the Mediterranean Sea to go to Europe, you realize, okay, there is a lot of things missing here. Many of our young men and women have died. Many have been trafficked along this route. Many have been raped, men and women, not just women, in the process. And of course, you don't even see or hear of many of them because they simply perish right in the Mediterranean Sea or in the desert before they get to the Mediterranean Sea, right? If you look at this, this is nothing more than the policies. This is effectively the result of the policies, migration policies that are pursued by the European Union, right? You've got the Frontex, which is guarding the European borders with air, water, and land security apparatus. So this is the work of the European Union. They are responsible for the deaths, for the African deaths that you see on the Mediterranean Sea, that you see in the Sahara Desert. Now, this is nothing surprising because their migration policies is geared towards excluding and not allowing Africans to come into Europe. This is essentially what it is. They don't want Africans to come to Europe. And they can couch this in different phrases or words or whatever. All the different agreements that they make with African countries, from North Africa to the Central Africa, it is all aimed at preventing migrants, African migrants coming from sub-Saharan Africa to Europe. That is why even when they manage to cross all these hurdles on the way to Europe, they get into the Mediterranean Sea, their boats are sinking or whatever, they do not offer help. Even when they are obliged to, by the rule of international law, they refuse to do it. Not only do they refuse to do it, for those of us as private citizens who then take on the responsibility of helping those in distress on the sea, they are being persecuted and prosecuted in the law court every time. You see, what does this mean? What it means is that this obligation of European states to help those in distress on the high sea, they abdicate this, right? And then they prosecute those, they prosecute actually in the courts, those private citizens who want to help those on the high sea. The thing is to say that the lives of these Africans being lost on the high sea doesn't matter anything to us. Because if you look at what is actually happening in a country like Germany, if you drove on the highway and you saw an accident, and this accident is there while you drove past, and you didn't stop to call for help, if you are found, you will be fined for not offering help. And now you see a situation where Africans are dying on the high sea. They not only refuse to rescue them and help them out of this distress, they punish those who try to help them. So that is a stark reality of what we experience in Europe. And I think many people in Africa are still not very well versed about all this. And this is why I think there is a need for us to re-educate ourselves so much, to learn so much about what is actually happening in our relations with Europe.
All right, thank you very much. I think there's an area I want to speak to, going to what you just said.
Right.
And that gives me a lot of concern. When you say a lot of lives have been lost on the sea, most especially the Africans.
Right.
So what is the place of the government? I mean, African governments. Let's not streamline it to either Nigeria, Ghana, So how do they account for these people? These are humans. These are humans. They leave their home country, going for in search of a greener pasture. Right. Yes, we talked about policy earlier, and I know that it is because of policies around, and people will just feel, okay, probably I can do it this way because this policy cannot accommodate me, so let me do it this way. Right. What is the role of the government in ensuring that those people, even though we know the parts they might use parts that are not too right. Right. I think there's a name. Someone our last guest said, "Is it illegal?" He said it's not illegal. Yeah. Irregular. Okay, that's irregular the word now. So they use the irregular route, to migrate. Right. Notwithstanding, they are humans. Right. Exactly. What is the place of the government in fixing all of this?
That is the problem. We are operating in a system where you have this imbalance of power. The power relations between the so-called Western countries, the so-called European countries, and Western developed countries, and the power that African countries and other countries have in relation to them is quite imbalanced, right? Because of that, you have institutions, international agreements, and very many other stuff that is lopsided to the benefit of these so-called developed countries. Europeans can easily get a visa one way or the other and be in Nigeria, be in Ghana, be in Africa, and everywhere. Because we cannot readily just get the visas to travel, and people have to take this route. That is the reason. We are advising them, open these borders and let people travel. Don't think that we are going to stay there. Very many Nigerians who went to London to travel to study in the 50s, 60s, they never stayed there. They did their studies and came back home. Why do you think we like your cold? We don't like this stuff that we are living there. We don't want to stay there, right? Open these borders, let us come, do whatever we want to do, however we want to do it, and we'll come back. But they think we are going to come there to stay there and take all their money. Actually, the money is not there. The money is actually here, which they are stealing from us. Wow. That is the reality, right? Okay. So if you look at it like this, you see the government has a responsibility to ensure the primary responsibility of the government is taking care of its citizens, right? And if your government can abandon you, as you do often find in many African countries, then what do you expect others to do? So it is not only here, it is also there. I remember a few years ago, there were the camps in North Africa, in Libya, where human beings, able-bodied men like me and others here, were being sold for forced labor. And you know who is funding those paramilitary groups doing this? The European Union is doing this. It's funding them. So we have to understand that they don't necessarily want us at all in this place. And so when we say we want to go to Europe, we want to go to wherever and make a better living, we have to understand the risks and dangers that's associated with it.
Okay, so when you say they don't want Africans there, well, I don't know. I don't quite agree, and I think I have my reasons. Recently, I read an article or a release where in the United States, I think in Maryland, they want to include a dialect from Nigeria, like Yoruba specifically,
right,
into I think
curriculum,
transportation screening process.
Right.
So and that is to accommodate Nigerians or other people that could speak Yoruba.
Yeah.
So in that way, they are saying, come.
Yeah, the thing is, when you have these isolated incidences, right, or instances, these are issues that have been dealt with on the superficial level. On the structural level, you see that we are at a huge disadvantage. And at the structural level is where we find the problem. You know, the German Constitution says the dignity of the human being can never be violated. Right? This is written in the very first page of the German Constitution. But look at how refugees are being treated in Germany or in Europe as a whole. Right? There is no way you violate the rights of refugees more than what you are seeing in all these countries. So they can deal with it superficially to say, look at how much we are welcoming people here and so forth and so on. But if you go into it, you realize it's a total contradiction of what they preach, right? They do not practice what they preach. And that is what we are advising them. We are telling them, open the legal route for migration and save the lives that have been destroyed on the sea and in the Mediterranean, in the Sahara Desert. You know, they do know it. It's not as if they don't know it. They do know it. At the same time, they are depending on the labor, on the cheap labor that is coming from these countries. Not long ago, I think in the UK, the new Prime Minister, they were putting out advertisement for teachers to come from Nigeria, Ghana, India, and all that, because they are short of teachers. They want to take teachers from these countries to come and help teach in their country with annual salaries that is quite competitive, let's put it like that. You understand? So if you look at all this, there is a contradiction between what they actually preach and what they do, and at the same time, there's the dilemma of wanting to embrace this and not wanting to really open up to it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sunday. It's been an amazing conversation all along, and I would like us to watch a video.
Right.
Because this is the segment we are going into now. It's the real-time segment.
Good.
Where people share personal experience. I want you to watch this video, and after now, we will respond. I mean, you're going to respond to some questions coming from around the video.
Great.
Let's go.
Started the process, and it took me like 3-4 years to be able to scale through. And on getting to Canada, I had to go into the labor market looking for jobs, trying to survive. But it took me a couple of months. It took me a month to get a job, and when I got the job, it was not really what I wanted. But coming in from Nigeria as an engineer and getting down here, starting the job of an housekeeper, which is doing the housekeeping in an hotel. And the difference between that and that of Nigeria is that you are comfortable with what you're doing, your employer respects you, they give you all the respect you deserve most times. But sometimes if you meet some racists, the racists still at work, but that doesn't stop you from not still working. But it's not a major thing right here in Canada. It's just one of those things, but it's not very obvious that you've been racist. But more better than coming back from Nigeria, because they don't hold you salary, they don't hold you wages, they pay you at when due, and the work you do is being appreciated. And for the difference between the workplace in Canada and in Nigeria, the difference is that Nigeria, we really make mess of our times. We don't really use the time work for the purpose of what it's being meant for. Like right here, every time counts because they pay you per hour and they expect you to make use of every hour that you have. Break is very important, and you have to observe your break at all time. In the other aspect of it is interesting, but sometimes you don't enjoy what you're doing. But because you have to pay bills, because you have to work, because bills will be waiting, and that makes you have to do what you have to do. Not that because you're happy with what you're doing, but because you just have to do it. At that time, maybe that is what is available. You make do with what is available, and that is just the rest. But the most important thing is that you are paid at when due. They don't owe you salary, they don't owe you wages, and one thing is they respect you at workplace. So working abroad or migrating abroad to start working is something that is more respected here than that of in Nigeria. Because like in Nigeria, you have to know somebody before you get a job. But like right here, you see it, you apply, you qualify, they pick you, and that's it. Because they believe in everything that you do, they still train you to their own taste. They still give you the orientation that you need for the job. They still give you every requirement, all the safety that requires you on the job. They make you understand what you're supposed to do. So that's just about working abroad. That's it. Thank you.
That was it.
Yeah.
This video will take me to talking about ethical consideration.
Right.
So, you know, there are different sides to a coin.
Right.
You know, to me, I might be seeing the A part, and you might be seeing the other part,
Right.
which is B. So, but we want to speak to the video we've just watched.
Right.
This person has explained that, over here though it's not easy, but their times have been respected.
Mm-hmm.
They themselves they've been respected for what they do. And
Yeah.
in fact, they even have to train them.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just start by asking, okay, ethical consideration surrounding labor migration,
Right.
such as recruitment and treatment of migrant workers,
Mm-hmm.
to ensure fair and just practices in the global labor market.
Right.
While you talk around this briefly, I want you to also bring it back home. The video was just what? That's,
Right.
I mean, I'm bringing it down.
Mm-hmm.
So he talks about, the respect and appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that we have it here? It's our home. We are
Right.
home.
Right.
There's this adage in Yoruba where they say the white hen or white chicken is not being respected
Mhm.
at home.
Exactly.
So you see people putting a lot of effort, and you still don't give them the respect that
Yeah.
they deserve. But this
Right.
person is saying, way back there, the respect is there.
Mhm.
Okay, so speak to this and also address this video.
Yeah. I appreciate the sincerity of the person who was speaking on this video, and I also appreciate that he putting this out for others to know what is happening.
Yeah, but you want to remain anonymous.
Sure, which is great. I respect that
Okay.
privacy. You see, part of what he spoke to is already what I was talking about before. He said, at some point, you experience racism
Yes.
in the office, in the place of work, right? You may wonder, what does it mean? If you are getting your money anyway, I mean, that's it. But there is nothing more. There is nothing more valuable than individual human dignity. You understand? And when you experience racism, this can eat very well into you for a long time with longing effect. Many of us don't see that as a big deal because here, many of us don't experience what we call racism in that sense. Okay? Now, the thing is, there are also places here where you also earn respect for the work you do, right? It's not particularly only there in Canada or in the Western world countries where this happens. Disrespect, insult, and all that also go with the territory in many of these countries. It's not one-sided, right? But it is also true that because we are not paying, we are not appreciating the value of the labor that we have here, and therefore we can afford to approach it the way we do here. We can definitely improve. There is no doubt about that, you know. And the thing we have to understand with this is that he has found himself in the situation where, as an engineer,
Yes.
he is doing a work of
Okay,
basically, yes, of basically a lay person's work, right? Dealing with home care, cleaning, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
This is not the work that an engineer would do in Nigeria,
Okay.
right? So if an engineer were to do that in Nigeria, imagine it. It will be something different. Nobody went to university to study for 5, 6, 7 years to come and be a cleaner, right? But the particular situation that forced him out of here has made him to accept that kind of low-level job that he's now doing. He wouldn't have settled for that somewhere else. So it brings back the responsibility to our country, to our leaders in this country. How can we allow our children to be trained from primary school through secondary school to universities and get a degree only to end up being a cleaner or a taxi driver somewhere else? You know what I mean? So we have to make provision where these people are being adequately employed in this country.
All right, thank you very much. I think before we call it a day, I'd like you to give your parting shot, most especially to people that still think migrating is the best option. Yes, it's not a crime. I mean,
Right.
it's a right.
Sure.
I think I've learned that migrating is a right. So give a parting shot. What advice do you have for people out there?
For me, personally, I can also tell you a little bit about what I am planning to do here. My intention is to find a way to re-educate, to be involved in re-educating part of our populace about the reality of the relationship between we as a people and those that we see as the developed people in the so-called developed countries. Because there is a narrative that goes along with this that seems, in my opinion, to undervalue ourselves before the outsiders. And I don't think this is right, but this is not particularly to blame anybody, but to blame the system that trains us to look at white people and the white system as the best system for us, whereas as Africans, we and our values are, our values are more suitable to us as a yardstick of judgment of who we are than looking forward to judge ourselves with European standards, which is actually, I would say, inferior to us. Right. So I would be very keen to be involved in kind of letting people realize where we are with this whole discourse, and being involved and being engaged in that kind of a field, I would feel quite important to do. The other thing is I work currently, I also lecture at the university, visiting lecturer in 2 universities in Germany, but I also do empowerment training. We're in a situation where many people feel they haven't got anything, they haven't got certificates, they haven't got houses and stuff like this, and therefore there's nothing, they don't have any power. I would like to do some empowerment work here for people to understand the power that they hold. You know, there's much power in self-organizing of the populace themselves, to agitate and advocate for themselves rather than looking forward to one politician to come and solve the problem and all that. I'm very interested in doing this grassroots work where people can really get together, define what they want, and try to strive and advocate for it. And this is part of the work I'm doing. I've been doing this there now in Europe for quite a long time. I would also like to do something like that here in Nigeria and other parts of Africa.
Oh yes, I must say a very big thank you to you, Dr. Sunday Onweyeke, for your time and insightful information that you've shared with us here today on the program Across Borders. Yes, definitely, I know you must have picked a couple of information that will be useful. I wouldn't say 1 or 2. Yes, couple of it. Yes, that will be useful for you. And of course, we'll be coming your way again next week on Across Borders with an exciting topic that will be turning things around for you. Dr. Sunday Onweyeke is a human rights activist and a veteran of the refugee. Thank you once again for coming.
Thank you so much.
Until next time, stay positive, stay open-minded, and be motivated. I remain Grace Komalafe. Do have an amazing time. Bye.